Hi there, Simon and Sarah. Okay, so Pax Mongolica. Now, under the Mongols, we're going to see some of the longest global trade of that kind of time. The Silk Road had kind of fallen by the wayside. Well, as we study China, we're going to see how like China's going to go through like these periods where they're really open, do lots of trade, and then they're really closed off and don't want any trade because they're worried about foreign influence, and then they go open again and close. And during the Mongols, it's going to be a time of huge openness. And the Silk Road is going to wind up actually becoming much safer to use. They're going to create posts and have patrols going on it. So it'll be very good for merchants to be able to go through, because it stopped getting used because, bandits and banditas like, Anna and Simon would go and like hide there and steal all your stuff. All right. Now, one of the things that the Mongols also do, which is going to wind up having a huge impact, is they're going to go and be very open with technology. For example, paper making is going to come to Europe. Gunpowder is going to come all over the world. The idea of movable type that the Chinese invented is going to wind up coming. And so this is one of the reasons why the Mongols are so critical, and it shocks me that your book doesn't go and connect these pieces. The Mongols made so many things happen, not because they did them, but because they enabled them. For example, the Renaissance would not have happened without things like the printing press. The printing press would not have happened if the Mongols hadn't gone and given the technology of movable type that the Chinese invented. Things like paper, wouldn't have happened, which the Mongols spread that technology. Gunpowder. There's a reason why after the Mongols, we talk about the Ottoman, Safavid, and Mughal empires. Not just because they're interesting and cool, but because the Mongols took that Chinese technology and gave it to others so that we can actually go and have that. And it's going to completely revolutionize how the world was. Because, imagine if the Chinese had kept the secret of gunpowder for themselves, the Mongols had never shared that, then the Chinese would have been the only people to have it. And then history would look completely different if Europeans never got a hold of it. Think about how we might not have had colonization or anything like that, or maybe the Chinese would have colonized and conquered a lot. It's amazing all the things that would be different if the Mongols hadn't done what they did. Even coal, like high temperature medicine. There's so much, like the medical advances that the Arabs had made during the golden age of Islam and the Persians. Guess what? That gets spread to Europe too. Whereas it stops being like, Jacob being the barber surgeon who's like, oh, you don't feel well? Maybe I should go and taste your pee to see what's wrong with you. Yeah, literally. They would taste what your pee tasted like to try to figure out what's wrong. I know, super gross. Yeah, they would go and they hold it up and be like, well, the color looks like this, so we think you got a little bit of a misplaced bile here, so I want you to eat these worms. And that was European medicine. And the Mongols are going to wind up spreading some of the amazing medical technology during the golden age of Islam that's going to change the Mongols did not do all of these things. They did not go make the Protestant Reformation happen. They did not make the Renaissance happen. They did not go and change medicine themselves, but they made it possible for those things to change. And that's why the Mongols are so critical to our discussion on the medieval world, because they are going to be one of the driving forces that change things to make all of this stuff happen. Yes, it is gross, I know. But here's the thing. This came at a tremendous cost. Now, historians' estimates vary greatly. On the small side, historians estimate 20 million people died. On the large side, historians estimate 50 million people died. Now, it's probably somewhere in the middle of that. But think about it. It's not just the deaths that they killed. It's not just all the people that they executed, but it's the fact that people had their homes burned, so then they died of exposure. The fact that food was, crops were burned, so that people died of starvation. The facts, that, the plague spreading. Actually, I don't think the plague statistics are in that. The fact, of all of the things besides massacres, besides, the secondary effects. So they think so many people wound up dying because of the Mongols. Just an estimate, they think the deaths from World War II was 50 to 56 million. And that was World War, and that was, 700 years later. 650 to 700. The Mongols themselves, they think that could have done almost as much as World War II. Like, that's kind of wild. Now, so you don't have to write down this chart, but it kind of gives you an idea. This is just where some of these things are going. So things like, honey. The Europeans had that. That product got traded all around. Glassware, slaves, horses. We're going to talk actually about rugs with the Persian rugs and how famous they are and how the Safavids will go and make that a big industry. But things like that. So we see, and here are like ideas going and moving around. Tons of stuff coming from China. This is what this is mostly talking about, although Korea a little bit. But all of these things getting all mixed up and traded, and the world becoming a smaller place because of this working together. It's pretty cool. So, like I said, you don't have to write down all of this stuff. And so let's look at how this goes. So, I mean, here we see some of the trade routes going. The red lines are trade routes. Also, these, like, I don't know if they're gray or black or whatever. These lines are their water routes. So we see tons of trade through land and water. Tons of trade. And let's just look at the growth of the Mongols. So this is 1206, Mongolia, and where they went and conquered. And we see how it grows, 1219, 13 years later, 4 years later. Another 4 years. Look at that, right? So when Chinggis dies, huge. And it gets bigger and bigger. And here we see 1279. Look at the size of that. It's incredible. The world's largest empire of contiguous land. And like I said, the British Empire is going to have like land all over and span more space because it's all over. But this is, when you go like feet, or meters, stuff like that, miles. Well, let's look compared to the world. Look at that. Looks like roughly the size of Africa. We could just throw Europe and Australia in there, no problem. And you have to also remember, too, that this is with this map projection is going to have some stretching. Like, Australia looks bigger than it really is. Like, so it's really, you could fit it in there. Europe looks a little bigger than it really is. And this is going to be the four Khanates. But that's where we're going to stop our notes right here. So I hope you guys enjoyed that. How do they rule that? Very carefully.